The government will always step in whenever they can to try and control what they don't know. It's not about violence. I think people, like I said, they see blood and they think it's a violent sport, and it's really not.
The story sets back to ancient Egypt in 3400 BC. It was here where it quickly became a man's responsibility to defend himself accordingly. The earliest depictions of martial arts have been found within ancient tombs. Fighting was the only right these men had to maintain a sense of pride. In late 2000 BC, a Chinese man nicknamed the Yellow Emperor went on to spread Kung Fu to his military as a technique of defense to be used in battle. In 1194 BC, the Greek poet Homer depicted hand-to-hand battle combat in his book of epic poetry, the Iliad. Long after, in 8th century BCE, Greek Olympic competitions started. It was here where it quickly became a man's responsibility to fight to the death. It was also their right to maintain pride for both themselves and their family. In 50 BCE, the earliest records of the Korean martial art Taekwondo first surfaced in the Myeongcheong Royal Tomb. This unarmed style of fighting would protect the lives of those in high societal ranks.
The monks created it to bring mind, body, and soul together and to protect their monastery from invaders. They were constantly invaded. Thieves and bandits figured, hey, these guys are monks, we'll go beat them up. They're pacifists, but they learned how to defend themselves through the martial arts.
As we travel from China to Japan at the end of the 10th century, new beginnings were on their way for martial arts. At the start of the 11th century, the Japanese samurais arose during war. The responsibility of these men was to show loyalty to their masters, have self-discipline, and act only in an ethical manner.
They were created to protect the emperor and the guards, and they were warlords and they were landowners, and they were the ones that made the rules, so in order to enforce them, they learned how to fight.
As the samurais became more and more powerful, the warrior code of Bushido was put in place. The code soon ensured that all samurais acted under 8 main principles. Maintaining traits like loyalty and honor soon became the responsibility of these men. In the early 1600s, martial arts soon began to break from the traditional Asian background. It soon appeared in Brazil. Soon after, a blend of dance and martial arts, capoeira, came about in Brazil. While the sport was quickly banned for giving Afro-Brazilian slaves a sense of self and freedom, the slaves continued to practice it. Despite being threatened to end the sport, capoeira practitioners knew it was their human right to do as they pleased, even if it was deemed as dangerous. In the early 1800s, savate, a French style of traditional kickboxing, began being practiced as street self-defense. After this, 2 notable men, Michael Cassot and Charles Lecou, soon arose. These men were adamantly in favor of giving all people the right to practice such a sport. Together, these men would go on to turn savate into a legitimate and successful martial art. In 1867, John Chambers, a Welsh sportsman, set up boxing's first rulebook. This rulebook required all fighters to use boxing gloves while fighting, and it also called for a maximum of 3-minute rounds. Back in Asia, Giorgio Kano develops a new martial art, Judo, from its Japanese jiu-jitsu roots. Little did anyone know just how essential this art would become for martial combat. In 1892, Jim Corbett became the very first heavyweight boxing champion after knocking out John Sullivan. This successful championship was fought under John Chambers, Marquis of Queensberry. In the late 1800s, Edward William Barton Wright, a European self-defense practitioner and a strong believer in the human right of defense, traveled to Japan. While in Japan, Wright practiced Shinden Fudo Ryu Jiu-Jitsu and later Kodokan Judo. Soon after, Wright traveled back to the West and turned his new technique into his own martial art, Bartitsu. This truly sparked an international interest in martial arts. In 1903, a Japanese man, Yamashita Yoshiaki, traveled to the US to spread his interest in judo. It was here where Yoshiaki met with President Theodore Roosevelt and taught him judo. After successfully choking out a popular American wrestler, President Roosevelt appointed Yoshiaki as the judo instructor at the U.S. Naval Academy. Yoshiaki will be forever remembered for teaching the U.S. soldiers the responsibility of protecting our country during war. Not only did he specialize in teaching judo to the soldiers, Yamashita Yoshiaki taught civilian women the right to properly defend themselves with the knowledge of judo. As we headed into the 20th century, boxing became an official Olympic sport. While sports like football, wrestling, and other seemingly dangerous activities were given a spot in the Summer Games, it appeared that it was only right to allow boxing into the mix. This event marked the beginning to the list of rights that were given to men to compete by way of martial arts. Many felt as though it was a personal responsibility to compete in such a way. While great success in the martial arts was happening in the United States, the Gracie brothers were starting to expand their legacy inside of Brazil. In 1925, Carlos Gracie opened the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school in Brazil. Though Carlos was very successful in getting the word out for his art, many will argue that his brother, Helio, is the most influential Gracie. While the gentle art is a highly useful system of self-defense, the most important message of the sport is to build character in those who train. That was something that the Gracie brothers felt was their responsibility to teach to their students. In 1945, as World War II came to a close, U.S. and British soldiers stationed in Japan would be left with new martial knowledge that they would soon bring home with them. The knowledge of martial arts soon became a vital force in the United States' success in World War II. American soldiers were picking up various techniques from the Japanese soldiers, and these concepts soon became the responsibility of all soldiers to know. Upon returning to the United States after World War II, Robert A. Trias headed back home to Arizona and formulated Shuri-Ryu Karate with the martial knowledge he collected during war. In 1959, an adolescent Bruce Lee traveled from Kowloon, Hong Kong to the United States. Lee would then go on to teach Wing Chun to Americans like Jesse Glover. Bruce's goal was to share his incredible wealth of knowledge with all who wished to listen. In 1975, after Bruce had passed away, his book Tao of Jeet Kune Do was published. This piece of literature held all of Lee's incredible philosophies, right down to his martial values and rights. In 1993, the very first Ultimate Fighting Championship was held in Denver, Colorado. It was here where Royce Gracie defeated kickboxer Gerard Gordeau by way of rear naked choke submission. Here, a worldwide phenomenon of mixed martial arts, or MMA, would soon become one of the most popular sports in the world. But as the sport became more and more popular, many began to question whether or not the sport was truly safe.
It's a very brutal sport, so we wanted to regulate it. And by putting the laws in place, we've now officially regulated the sport, just like boxing. Regulation's important. What happens if a fighter is injured? What do you do?
As more people become familiar with the sport, it seems that they are forgetting the essence of basic human rights. The martial arts were made out of a desperate need of defense in times of war. While many will argue that this art shouldn't be placed in a competitive setting, these people are standing against our rights and responsibilities that have been laid down by our founding fathers. John McCain referred to MMA as barbaric, and he said that it simply is not a sport in an attempt to ban it. Some of his supporters also compare MMA to dogfighting. But how can you compare two animals with no rights fighting to their death to two people competing willingly with a referee in the middle to maintain balance?
Mixed martial arts is a sport. It's a sport that combines boxing, which is legal. It combines wrestling, which is legal. It combines Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is legal. There's less injuries in mixed martial arts than there are in Pee Wee football.
Finally, all U.S. states, not including New York, have caught on to the growing understanding that mixed martial arts should be performed just like any other sport, because these kinds of rights trace back to America's Declaration of Independence. While New York still hasn't made the push for legalization, I am anticipating that it will come very soon. Though Connecticut State Representative Matthew Ritter isn't in favor of mixed martial arts itself, as a representative for Hartford, he understands that it's his responsibility to help aid the current economy.
If the fights did come, it'd be huge. I mean, let's say that they came to Hartford once or twice a year. You're talking 16,500 people, and the more events you have, eventually it adds up.
Since the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut has been experiencing an economic downfall for an exhausting amount of time, holding MMA events here would be a key factor in aiding the economy. Also, by holding just 5 MMA events annually in this city, up to $360,000 can be generated for the state of Connecticut. In the end, the legalization of MMA does not promote violence in any way. Rather, it teaches people that they can achieve anything through proper discipline and dedication. Denying a person their human right to do something they love is simply inhumane.
I think they should be able to do it because that's what they want to do, and this is America. It's a free country. If these guys want to step in the ring and do battle, they should be allowed to. Our government should not be overseeing every little thing that we do.